NRA quiet on alleged role as Russian conduit in Mariia Butina charges. And thanks to you at home for joining us. This are happy to have you with us. Alright, playing the part of United States Federal District Court Judge Tanya Aplane. That part will be me playing the part of Thomas and Saunders, federal prosecutor in the National Security Section of the DCS Attorney's Office. That part will be played also by me, and playing the part of Driscoll, who represents accused Russian secret agent Mariia Butina as her defense attorney. That part will also be played by me, and I know that sounds cheap. It's a delicate balance on the salaries actors with speaking roles were making up for in terrible acting by me. So what's going on here is that accused Russian secret agent has been in jail now for a week and a half. She was arrested last weekend right before the Trump-Putin summit in Helsinki. She was actually arrested before the summit started, even though we didn't find out about it at the time. The court didn't unseal the case against her until a few hours after the summer was concluded. Guidance of those two events is potentially interesting because she's accused of being an agent of the Russian Federation, right? Secretly mount an influence operation in this country on behalf of the Russian government to influence what's the Republican Party around the 2016 presidential election. Since they unsealed her case right after the summit ended, we have learned a lot of interesting stuff about what exactly the government is accusing her of, and it's fascinating, right? I think we are hardwired as humans to think that secret agent stuff is just inherently fascinating, otherwise they wouldn't be books with shiny covers for sale in airport bookstores. The news in terms of the country, in terms of this presidency, in terms of the big scandal that has followed the president home from that summit with Putin in Helsinki last week, there does remain one really big house yet unanswered question about the Mariia Butina case. Does her case stand alone, or does it link into the larger Russia scandal, the other prosecutions, the Russian government's effort to swing the election? Does it link into the crucial question of whether the president and his campaign were somehow in on that Russian operation to influence the election? So tell you that the bottom line here is that part of what came out in this court hearing today, as the prosecutors say her case is connected to the largest, or at least the evidence in her case is connected, they say, to other on-in cases and investigations. I should warn you in advance, there's also a little argument about sex and her personal diary. I swear it is relevant questions here, but you should know what happens. Okay, court starts right away, and it's about discovery. It's about the evidence and materials the prosecution has seized in their case against Mariia Butina, and this question is now being litigated in court as to whether and when and how her defense lawyer is going to be allowed to see all that stuff that the government has seized. Mr. Saunders, the prosecutor: good morning, Your Honor. Thank you very much. The judge: good morning, prosecutor. Government has substantial discovery that they're ready to turn over right away. Right now we already have about 4 to 6 terabytes of data, the equivalent of over 1.5 million files that we're ready to turn over just as fast as it can be loaded onto a portable hard drive. There are approximately 4 to 6 terabytes. Then the judge doesn't let me stop you. How long do you think that will take the transfer? Couple nights. Judge says alright, okay, prosecutor, I think should be ready in maybe 2 weeks, and again, once it's ready it shouldn't take more than a couple of days to put it onto a hard drive and provide it to defense counsel. Judge says okay, prosecutor, for the bottom line is the government wants to provide this to the defense right away, immediately, so that they can begin to prepare their defense in the courtroom. Protective order from the government's position is essential, not just for the normal reasons of protecting third parties' personal identifying information, but also to protect potential ongoing investigations and just the nature of this case. And in our discussions, the question that seems to be overlying the conflict between the two parties, to put it frankly, is whether or not the defense counsel wants this information right away so he can prepare for a defense in this court, or if friends counsel wants this information so that they can use it on cable news. The reason I put it that way, Your Honor, is that we proposed a basic protective order that says the information can be used for their defense. In this case, it gives the defense wide latitude, including showing it to the appropriate witnesses, showing of those witnesses' attorneys. The defense rejected that offer, and the defense's response is no, we should have free rein to use that material however we want. Now our protective order says that you can use it for this case, but you can't use it for other purposes including public disclosure like going on the press, and the defense has no, we should have free rein. That's an exact quote from defense counsel. Concerns about protecting this information would be, and then the judge jumps in, the personal identifying information. What are your other security concerns? Prosecutor are concerned about protecting the integrity of potential ongoing investigations related to this case, potential other cases as well. Alright, potential other cases as well that might be affected by the disclosure of the evidence in the Mariia Butina case. So the prosecutors here are telling the judge it's bad that Mariia Butina's defense lawyer has been going on dreaded cable news and talking about her case, defending her in the court of public opinion. Over the course of the day they go on to fight with him about why that is bad in and of itself. The judge at one point says to Mariia Butina, his defense lawyer, do you think it's in your client's interest to have her case tried in the press? To later tells Between Us, or bluntly, quote, I certainly don't want to have to impose a gag order as other judges have in other cases in this court, but I will entertain a motion or request to do so if I think that your statements cross the line and violate our local rules. So I am. So there's this fight in court today over the defense lawyer for Mariia Butina talking to the press about her case, and the prosecution is pressing there are given in. The judge seems to basic shouldn't be doing that. The judge bluntly warrant her defense. She also later a protective order in this case, at least for some material, which means the judge said today in open court that she will set limits on what Butina can do and can't do with the evidence against her that the government has turned up. Once the government have to hand that so they can prepare their defense today, it definitely lands on a very one-sided way. But for us, the presidency, on the big question of does this dramatic case against this accused Russian agent play into the larger scandal involving Russia and the election and all the other indictments that have come out? This is connected to other ongoing cases and other potential cases as well, and they're saying that's related to why we need to stop her attorney from putting the evidence against her out in the press. That stuff is sensitive. It relates to ongoing cases and potentially other cases as well. The judge goes with that. Here's the defense lawyer, quote, once they're seized by the government, and when the government gives them back, they can restrict they can protect them under a protective order. Judge Johnson, whose material, for example, on her computer that the government is using in connection with an ongoing investigation merely because it was in the possession of your client, doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be kept confidential because there are ongoing investigations. The fact that it was in your class possession doesn't give it some kind of talismanic protection, and so I'm not clearly understanding your position, defense lawyer. I mean, it's my position that it's the government diary, my client's notes, all those kinds of things are just simply documents of my client's immigration papers, all those things, simply because they come into the position, simply because they came into possession of the government, doesn't lose her First Amendment rights or her ability to do with those documents what she wants. The judge, well, this is a pending criminal case. I'm sort of curious as to what you would be planning to do with her immigration document or her diary in advance of the trial. Defense lawyer, well, I mean, they might be evidence at the trial, but there might be other purposes for which they would be used. There are ongoing congressional investigations, for example, that we've been dealing with. A lot of the same documents have already been produced of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Judge will certainly at those documents are subject of a subpoena. You can go to the government and say that these items have been subject to subpoena. So this is the judge whittling the defense lawyer down to it. What he's saying, this is her stuff that the government seized. We should be able to do whatever we want with that. You can't stop us from giving it to the press. The judge basically says, seriously, ongoing open investigation, of course you can't do anything you want with it. And on that last point from the transcript there about how his client has already been questioned by other parts of the government where he raised his congressional investigations and stuff that actually end up being important. Welcome back to that in a second. There's just this one last thing you should see from the hearing today. I mentioned that there was a discussion about sex-related allegations. This is that part. It does not go well for the defense lawyer. Remember where this came from last week. The prosecutors laid out a case for the judge that Mariia Butina shouldn't be released on bail. They were arguing that she's a flight risk, that she might basically go back to Russia, was no reason to expect that she bound to stay in the United States and face this trial. And in order to make that case, the prosecutors argued that what appeared to be her personal ties, even her emotional ties to the United States, they argue that those ties real. This is what they filed with the court last week under the headline Butina's quote tie to the United States is a duplicitous relationship. This is prosecutors few days ago quote Butina gained access through U.S. Person 1 to an extensive network of US persons in positions to influence political activities in the United States. Least you have cohabited and been involved in a personal relationship during the course of Butina's activities in the United States, but this relationship does not represent a strong tie to the United States because Mariia Butina appears to treat it as simply unnecessary aspect of her activities. For example, on at least one occasion Butina offered an individual other than us person 1 sex in exchange for a position within a special interest organization. Further, and paper seized by the FBI, things about living with us person 1 and expressed disdain for continuing to cohabitate with us person 1. That was a prosecution last week. They're saying, listen, she's a spy, she's only involved with this guy because it's part of our cover as a spy. Today Butina's defense lawyer went off on that. He and his clients are absolutely not going to stand for that from the prosecution. He went after that on this specific issue in court today and it didn't go well. Depends where we did make a special request that the government to receive on an expedited basis any evidence they had to back up their claim that Miss Butina traded sex. Unfortunately, a big issue in the media. It was preferred as profit in the bond hearing. Before, we have no idea what the government's talking about. We don't believe it's true and the government has. We presume they could just give that part of it to us so we can what it is in. The government is not agreed to do that. They said we can wait till discovery to do that. And then the judge jumps in. Your Saunders speaking to the prosecutor. Now our position is twofold. One is we want to make sure the protective order is in place before giving over anything, and second, we're concerned about to what youth anything will be put, and if the defense is he can particular pieces of evidence so they can take him to the news. We don't want that violation of the local rules. The judge right, I think Mr. Driscoll, you're certainly entitled to discover, you're certainly entitled to know the basis of the charges against your client in accordance with our local rules, but I'm not sure you're entitled to specific pieces of evidence to rebut media reports. I'm sure it's not pleasant to read incorrect things about your client. No lawyer like that. Of my obligations here are to get this case resolved, whether that be through trial or any other way, in an expeditious and fair certain extent. That you'll get that information, you'll get it as you would any other information in this trial. So now I'm not helping you figure out why the government said that thing about your client and trading sex for a job. The prosecution has said that part of Mariia Butina's secret cover for her operation in this country on behalf of the Russian government is that she was supposedly romantically involved with this older man, a Republican political activist in South Dakota. Government is making that public case because their relationship wasn't an earnest relationship, it wasn't real. They're saying that was part of her cover story as a secret agent carrying out this influence operation on behalf of the Russian government. Now whether or not have been true love, this ends up being sort of a key element in how the Mariia Butina secret agent case relates to the connections. Actually, this is one of them. In one of the links it's already established that prosecutors say Mariia Butina was funded operation by a Russian billionaire. Washington Post has since named that Russian billionaire. They have also reported that billionaire's son worked on the Trump campaign. We have contacted the Trump campaign to ask them about whether that's true, and if so, what role was played on the campaign by the son of the man who is alleged to have funded this Russian influence operation during the campaign. So far we have not heard back from the campaign on that. We will let you know when we do. Another potential link to the Trump campaign is through this guy, U.S. Person 1, the unnamed American citizen who Mariia Butina was involved with. Zach's personal relationship. He lives in South Dakota, and I am here to sing the praises of a local hero, South Dakota journalist named Seth Topper from the Rapid City Journal, because Mr. Topper today tracked down a proposed order of cooperation between Mariia Butina and federal prosecutors in South Dakota and offered that dates back to May of this year. Mariia Butina was apparently at least considering offering testimony DNA or evidence to prosecutors for their investigation of her supposed boyfriend in South Dakota. She was offering the U.S. attorney in South Dakota. She was considering an offer from the U.S. attorney in South Dakota that she would cooperate with them and their upper supposed boyfriend. Now, depending on how things worked in that particular relationship, that would seem to bolster the prosecution's case that maybe this wasn't true love if she was talking about what she might be able to them against her guy. Well, her guy, this American man, has not been charged with anything as far as we know, but he is described in court filings as basically a co-conspirator helping her with her efforts to end the Republican Party in large part through the NRA. It is a comment on this case at all? No light on this indictment since it was first unsealed. I mean, this is federal prosecutors including veteran and offering evidence in court that the NRA was used extensively by the Russian government in an illegal intelligence operation for more than a week now. In January, McClatchy reported that the FBI was investigating money through the NRA. Trump win the election, but that was before we got this indictment about how else Russia was using the NRA to try to influence the election. That was before Butina's defense lawyer was contacted by the FEC in March about, quote, whether or not certain donations have been made to political campaigns. That was before the Washington Post reported today that Mariia Butina testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee that one of her sources of the United States in 2016 was a $5,000 a month consulting deal she had with the Outdoor Channel television network to provide advice on a planned program on hunting in Russia. How to get hooked up with the Outdoor Channel, quote, the Outdoor Channel's chief executive Jim Lippeter accompanied an NRA delegation that was hosted by Mariia Butina in Moscow in December 2015, and in deep red arrow there's the guy from the Outdoor Channel and a whole bunch of officials from the NRA in Moscow in December 2015 with accused Russian agent Mariia Butina. December 2015, that's exactly the same time that Trump National Security Advisor Mike Flynn was also in Moscow sitting next to Vladimir Putin at a banquet dinner for Russian state TV. Same time presidential primary started, what was the NRA accused Russian agent on their payroll for $5,000 a month in 2016 in the date today, and they did confirm to us now there's no reason to think that the Outdoor Channel knew at the time that the person they can put on their payroll was a secret agent who is now accused of running a Russian government influence operation to influence our election at the time. But that is what they did. And so, last player, these gun rights folks potentially a conduit for Russian money alongside forms of Russian government influence on our 2016 campaign. McClatchy was on that story first. Honestly, they took tons of heat for that story and they stood by it throughout, but now that story today, right now, it is a much more open question. It would be really good to find that out. The NRA coordinate federal prosecutors was a conduit for secret Russian government influence operation design it the campaign where they the conduit for another kind. Flights from Russia to the FBI's been looking into Russian money flowing through the NRA to benefit Trump. Did that happen on the day we learned that Mariia Butina was arrested? Her arrest warrant, the criminal complaint against her, the FBI affidavit against her, the day that was all unsealed on the day of the Trump-Putin summit in Helsinki. That day unveiled a new rule, the requirement which has existed for nearly 50 years in this country. They would be dropping the requirement that organizations like the NRA have to disclose their major donors to the IRS on the day the Mariia requirement. Seriously, why that new rule and why that day? YouTube, if you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos. Rachel Maddow shows that prosecutors in the Mariia Butina case say their evidence overlaps with other investigations, and notes that the NRA has been oddly silent on how they're cast as a tool of Russia in the Butina charges. They're cast as a tool of Russia in the Butina charges. They're cast as a tool of Russia in the Butina